$27 million the state has spent since 2020. And this is against the backdrop of these conditions in the prisons that are just absolute squalor, that the legislature has long said, well, we don't have money. We don't have any money to fix these problems. Well, we clearly have money to pay attorneys to defend the system.
All righty. Welcome in. Alabama Politics this week. Josh Moon and
David Person.
How are you, David?
I'm all right, man. It's a new day and glad to see it.
Yeah, that's right. Before we hop in and tell you about our only candidate for governor in this state, we're going to tell you first about some better news, and that's the folks that sponsor this fine podcast. It is Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wind Creek Entertainment. Those folks they do a great job. I'm telling you, y'all are all going on beach vacations. School is out. Everybody's out of school. You plan these things out. You're going to the Gulf Coast. You're going to go down 65. You're going, now we don't have Will Ainsworth to widen it all the way down to, to 3 lanes all the way north and south. He's not going to be governor, so that's never going to happen. So you're going to be stuck in traffic all the time. I'm telling you now, book yourself a nice stay at the resort in Wetumpka or the resort in Atmore, depending on where you're coming from or where you want to go. Break that trip up a little bit. Go to the spa, get yourself a massage. Get that road rage massaged right out of you. Have a nice dinner. Let the kids play at the pool, in the arcade, at the bowling alley. Y'all go and play some of the adult games around there. I'm telling you, they should just let me do commercials. They should just let me do commercials for me. Because this is a genius idea. I'm telling you, it is. I hate to say that about myself, but this was a genius idea. Go down, do this. You will not regret it. Or if you're in those areas, just go hang out. Just go hang out a little bit. There's fun times. They've always got some great entertainment going. Check the entertainment schedules in Wetumpka and Atmore, because you will not regret that either. Look them up online. It's Wind Creek Entertainment. Book yourself a nice stay and have a good time. Tell them we sent you. I'll tell you this. We'll tell them that we've been sending some folks, because the CEO of Porch Creek, the Porch Creek folks in Wind Creek, is going to be on with us. That's Stephanie Bryant. She's going to be on the end of June 25th, I believe. So we're looking forward to having her on to talk about some of the things that Tribe has done. And really, honestly, her visit has nothing to do with gaming. We're just going to talk about the life on the reservation and what it's like, and talk about some of the things that I saw when I went on my visit. So that should be a fun time. All right, not so fun time. One Thomas Hawley Tuberville has thrown his name out there. He's no longer going to be your senior U.S. senator. That's going to, now Katie Britt, after 2026, is going to be your senior U.S. senator from the state of Alabama, which honestly it does give you a little more comfort.
Well, it's better for us at least at this juncture.
Yeah.
I mean, considering what we've had and what she will present, I think it's better for us right now.
Well,
I still like to see a Democrat in there.
I would too.
And I hope we get one, but as long as she's done a credible job. I don't agree with everything she's done, obviously. Don't like her politics. Yeah. But she's comported herself well, especially compared to Tuberville.
Yeah, I'll say I feel like she's entered into some things that she did not need to, and I have not been shy. I've told her this. I feel like she said some Trumpian type things that she did not need to say. Supported some things that she did not need to support, both because it was superficial nonsense that benefited no one, and not supporting it would have not harmed her in any way politically. So I felt like it was just things she didn't need to do, and so I have quibbled with that. I will say I know some folks who work on the staffs of some Democratic senators, U.S. senators from other states, and they talk very highly of Katie Britt and of the influence she has, and the way that she's willing to listen. Her staff is still the same, is also of that same vein. They work well with other staffs around from both sides of the aisle, and it'll be nice to have someone there in the senior role that is actively looking to get legislation passed. Tommy Tuberville, in all of his time there, has passed 0 bills. Okay, he's passed 0 bills. He's done nothing. He's done nothing there. He's done nothing. He's not sponsored anything that's passed. To put that into perspective, Doug Jones sponsored 23 pieces of legislation in a 2-year period that passed. They were signed into law. 23. Tommy Tuberville's been there 6 years, has done zilch.
How many pieces of legislation has Katie Britt passed? Do you know?
I do not know the answer to that. When I went and looked these things up, I honestly, I did not even think of doing Katie Britt to see what she's passed. But I know that she has passed some things.
Well, I know she sponsored some things. I don't know how many she sponsored. I don't know how many she's passed, but I do know I've seen some. Yeah,
probably be in the double-digit range, is if I had to guess.
Well, based on what you just said, even if it was only one, that'd be better than Tuberville.
Right, yeah.
But I feel pretty certain it's been more than one. I've seen her stakeout positions legislatively on things. So again, she's a conservative Republican. I'm not. So that means that I'm going to have a problem with where she's coming from as a general matter of ideology and philosophy. But I will say, as I said about the person I consider to be her predecessor and her mentor, Richard Shelby, he was somebody who did a lot of good for Alabama. And I see her as being the same kind of person. But let's shift for a minute, though, because, we're talking a lot about Katie Britt, and really, I think the topic of today for both of us really is Tuberville announcing that he's going to run for governor. Does it surprise you, considering all that's out there? Does it shock you or surprise you that he has actually decided to move forward?
No.
Why not?
Well, I think. All right, so this is the discussion that I wanted to get into today. All right, because I'm going to say this about here's a couple of things that I wanted to say about Tommy Tuberville. One, Tommy Tuberville has failed, and that he has been to me the worst kind of a failure, because I feel like Tommy Tuberville has the abilities to do much more with in the positions that he's been in. And what I mean by that is I've dealt personally with Tommy Tuberville. Okay. I did it for many years while he was the head coach at Auburn, and I was a sports writer. I was not the beat writer. I didn't cover him every single day like guys like J.G. Tate and Philip Marshall and some of those folks did. So I wasn't there day in and day out. Those guys, although I will say those guys, for the most part, liked Tommy Tuberville. They liked dealing with him, felt like he was a pretty good guy. Matter of fact, liked him way more than they liked Gus Malzahn, Brian Harsin, and even to a certain degree, Hugh Freeze now. And certainly Nick Saban. Tuberville is personable. He is easy to talk to. He is a guy who, even if you want to hate him, you come away a lot of times liking him, because you walk out. I can't remember how many times I walked out of the meeting room or the office or whatever over there and thought, he is so full of shit, but God damn, that was a lot of fun. That was, what I mean? He's one of those kind of guys, one of these people that will occasionally drop in a third person reference of himself. You know what I mean? And it's just like, oh, Tubbs here, I had to tell him, and it's just like, you know what I mean? He's one of those type people. And it just, he had the ability to do more if he cared more about the job. He had ability to connect to people and an ability to do stuff. And he had experiences that a lot of other people never had. And I don't feel like he used those experiences to benefit the marginalized and the people who needed him most. He sat in thousands and thousands of living rooms of impoverished players and their families and saw what they had struggled with, how hard they worked, what an education meant to them, what, the communities that they dealt with and the problems that they've dealt with and the struggles and the speed bumps and hurdles that have been put in their lives. He knew it firsthand. And he's done nothing. That to me is the biggest problem that I've had with Tommy Tuberville. Okay, and so
okay, but
that's the reason why I still have a problem with him today. And the reason why I think he's not going, he went forward with this was because there are no laws anymore. You know, I don't. There are no.
But why? I guess
laws.
I guess what I'm asking is he had at least two options. One was to stay. And as long as he stayed, he probably was going to win, in all likelihood. But,
gonna run against him.
So, he could have stayed. Why does he decide to make this shift to the governor's race as opposed to just staying where he's already had success and is likely to have more?
You know what, man? I cannot answer that. I cannot answer why he wants to be a governor, other than he simply didn't want to go home. He did not like the Senate, did not feel as though he was. I know that. I know that there now that he's done this, there have been a lot of senators who are talking, and talking about the private world of the Senate up there, where they did not really respect Tommy Tuberville because of just what I said. He didn't try very hard, and I think that you go and do that job, and no matter what ideology you have, the fact that somebody isn't really putting in the effort kind of pisses you off, and I think that played a role in this. He wasn't Katie Britt. He wasn't doing the things that she's doing, that, the getting in and, creating relationships and trying to pass meaningful legislation and trying to do things that in their view, help the country and help the people. I'm not saying I wanted him to do things that I agreed with. That's not what I'm saying. Of course I did, but that's not necessarily how I would judge him as an effective senator.
You're saying that he was trying to coast, and I guess he wanted acclaim or acceptance or affirmation for coasting, and he wasn't getting it.
No.
And so maybe he thought, well, then if I'm not going to get it there, maybe I can get more acclaim or more affirmation if I run for governor and become governor.
I'm saying maybe to that, because I honestly, I don't know. I've sat and talked to people and tried to figure this out and tried to figure out why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? Because we all know that he's got this huge residency problem just sitting there. And I'll say this, it is endlessly discouraging to me that the Republicans in this state are going to, I've never seen really anything like this. Okay. Where in an AL.com story the other day, Bill Armstead, who was the former chairman of the Alabama Republican Party, the ALGOP, essentially said out loud, where somebody wrote it. Okay. He had basically said, man, we got all 9 seats on the Supreme Court, so I don't think he's really got anything to worry about.
Yeah. He said the quiet part out loud. Yeah.
It's what drives me bonkers is no one disputes that this man is never, ever going to be able to prove that he lives in the state of Alabama or can meet the residency requirement of the state of Alabama, in which you have to live here 7 years prior to the next election, which it was 7 years from, whatever, November of 26, that's, he's got to meet that. Okay. And no one disputes that he can't do that. All right. When you lay out the evidence of this, everybody goes, yeah, no, definitely can't do that. But what they do say is, well, but I mean, it's a bunch of Republicans in these judge.
Yeah. They don't expect accountability. Yeah.
That's what but this is law. So where does this stop? Where does is it just residency or is it also theft? Can we get away with theft now? Fraud? Is fraud okay? I'm asking because I think you're right. And I think the point you're making is
it's a slippery slope. And if this is allowed, and they believe there won't be accountability from the Supreme Court, which means that they're creating a slippery slope for fraud or theft or other possible acts of malfeasance.
Well,
now, yeah.
But I want to say real quick.
Okay.
I'm not really saying it's a slippery slope. I'm saying it's a cliff. I'm saying,
okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because this is the law. This is the law that we have. I mean, it's you look it up, you can Google it pretty easily, and it's pretty clear what the law is. And we've held other people accountable to this law. As a matter of fact, we put a guy in jail. I mean, it wasn't really for this, but it was part of this. Yeah, it was part of this. Okay. I mean, he voted in the wrong place, and you could make the similar sort of argument for Tommy Tuberville at this point as well, about whether or not he voted in the state in which he was a resident, or whether or not he lied about that. And so, I'm just saying, no, if no one's disputing this, and we all know, if he had to do this in front of a judge or in a courtroom somewhere, the evidence would be overwhelming that he does not live at that house in Auburn, and he lives at a beach house in Florida. And that's what the law would say here. And so you're telling me that the people that we have in the role of our most trusted justices, okay, our Alabama Supreme Court,
right?
You're saying
right.
They're going to ignore the law.
Well, we can't say they're going to do it, but what we can say is that's what Republican leaders believe.
Yes. Yeah. That's what the
perception is, that they're going to do that.
Yeah. And that they're okay with it. They're okay with it. Yeah. That's what
they're very comfortable.
Go on, run, coach. Go on and run.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
That's got to bother the hell out of everybody.
To
me, it should bother everybody. But I will say, but you were going to say something just a second ago.
What I was gonna bring up Randy Kelly, because we were talking earlier before we started recording the podcast about Randy Kelly and his statement, and you were saying you think it's the strongest statement that he's put together since he's been the chair of the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Let's go on and flesh that out. Let's talk about what Randy Kelly is the what he's laying out as a case, and what we think the probable trajectory is going to be.
Okay. All right. Let me first of all, let me read the statement. This is the statement he put out last night after Tuberville's announcement. It said, today, Tommy Tuberville finally revealed the open secret that he is planning to run for governor of Alabama despite not living here. His primary residence is in Florida. Alabama's Constitution, Section 117, clearly states that gubernatorial candidates must be resident citizens of the state at least 7 years before the date of their election, said Kelly, claiming his son's house as a homestead exemption while all travel receipts, voting, and living take place in Florida simply doesn't cut it. We intend to challenge his residency in the courts. If residency is no longer a requirement to run for office in the state of Alabama, that opens the doors for Democrats as well. Tuberville is an incompetent senator who embarrassed the state of Alabama via his withholding of military promotions for nearly 10 months. He will be well aligned with the Trump administration, who openly flouts the law and Constitution daily. We will not enable Tuberville to help Trump take money from Alabama's needy families and give it to the rich. Alabamians are already suffering the imminent loss of Medicare dollars, with rural hospital closures on the horizon, and Social Security and public education are in jeopardy to subsidize the wealthy. Tuberville will do nothing to further the interest of Alabama voters, simply himself and Trump's ego. Certainly, there were, I would say there were two portions of that. The upper portion dealing with the residency issues and things, and the promise to challenge this in courts, and then the bottom, in which he talked about Tuberville's failure as a senator. And I think both of them were equally important. But I also think, I would say both of them are important. One was probably a little more important than the other, and that is the fact that Democrats plan to file a legal challenge against Tuberville. Now, speaking to an attorney today, there's some question about when that challenge may be filed. And some folks would say that you can file it after the primary, after he becomes their nominee. You can the Democrats could then file it to have him booted from the ballot. But others feel like it has to come after the general election, after he's won. Or I assume you of course you probably wouldn't file it if you didn't win.
Right.
But
right.
Yeah, and so they're going to challenge this in court, and so let me, I guess, tell folks kind of what that looks like, and because I know it from the David Cole stuff. I reported on David Cole and followed that case along, and took the ridicule from David Cole, who told me that I was creating a mountain out of a molehill, and there was nothing I couldn't believe that somebody would actually show up to his court dates and other things. And I said, dude, I think this is a pretty serious thing that you've done here. You didn't lie about this, and lo and behold, the person who agreed with me was Steve Marshall. It's, one of the few times he and I have agreed, but we agreed on this one. And that David Cole eventually went to jail for voting in the wrong district. He because to establish his residency at the wrong house, a friend's house, he voted. He filed a voter registration card and voted there. And Tommy Tuberville has done the same in this house in Auburn, where he claims to live. And so we'll see what comes of that. But in terms of simply the residency issue, what would take place is this thing is decided ultimately by a joint session of the Alabama legislature. So you file it with the circuit court. So it'll be filed in the circuit court in Montgomery. And then a circuit court judge there will be assigned to manage the case. And that judge would basically treat it as any other case. And they would just simply start gathering the discovery things that go on in any case that is filed in the state of Alabama or anywhere else. You have a number of things that take place long before, let's say in a civil trial, for example, you have a number of things that take place long before it ever gets in front of the judge in the courtroom for the actual trial. And the gathering of all that information would be managed by the court and the judge, and they would go through, there's a deposition process that they could go through. There's a discovery phase of things where they collect records and documents and other things that would have to be turned over. There are going to be 100 different challenges that go back and forth to the Alabama Supreme Court. Where Tuberville is kind of screwed in this is Alabama just went through this with David Cole. And so there are a lot of challenges that would, I guess would ordinarily have taken place that now won't have to take place because we just did it. And so there's going to be a number of things that they're going to request and they're going to try to block that the Supreme Court just answered, because Cole went to the Supreme Court, I want to say 4 different times, to challenge certain things that were taking place in his case. And the Supreme Court every time ruled on the side of the judge in Madison County. And so I think as long as the judge in Montgomery kind of follows that same playbook, if this challenge goes forward, I mean, he's going to have to answer this. And the Alabama Supreme, let me say this, they're going to have to overlook the law and blatantly tell you that the law doesn't matter.
The Alabama Supreme Court.
They're either the Alabama Supreme Court or the Alabama legislature is going to have to overlook the law and tell you that it doesn't matter that he broke it. Okay. Because there's not going to be a question about that, whether or not he broke it. And I'll say people keep talking about the Supreme Court. I don't think the Supreme Court's going to do that. I think the Alabama legislature is going to do that because they tried to do it with David Cole. They literally, in the process of doing this, and the process of me reporting on it, and of a challenge being filed by a Libertarian candidate to David Cole's win in his residency, the Alabama legislature, led by Republicans, Chris Pringle, and specifically, filed a bill that actually they inserted it into another bill. Into this Frankenstein bill, they inserted this language in it that basically would have made it impossible to challenge the residency of a person who was elected. And They tried to do it right in the middle of it, knowing full well that he was guilty.
Okay, so having said all of that, Tommy Tuberville is running. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that he gets the Republican primary. He wins the Republican primary, and let's assume, for the sake of argument, okay, so he wins the Republican primary. All right, so then he goes to the general election.
Yes.
Is that when you think the challenge should start? I mean, you've talked about the two, the two or more possibilities. So
I would say yes. I mean, I would go ahead and file it, and then let a court tell you, either you can start it or you cannot, because, there's going to be a long and drawn out, tortured process that takes place. And I would say yes, go ahead and file. If there's some argument that you can do it and the law is murky, as a lot of the lawyers tell me, then I'd say file it and let a judge say, look, we're going to have to hold off on this until X date, or we're going to go ahead and we're going to start gathering some of this stuff and moving the process forward, while knowing that we're probably not going to complete this until after the general election.
All right, so let's say Tuberville gets to the general election, even though neither one of us want to see this. Let's say he wins. And let's say a legal challenge goes forward that wins, meaning that he's found to have been ineligible to run. What happens then in terms of the state of Alabama and who's governor?
I would assume at that particular point that the lieutenant governor would become governor for a period of time. I believe the Alabama legislature a couple of years ago passed a new law that says if you're X number of days out from the next election, then a special election has to be held for that seat. And so I believe then that the probably lieutenant governor would become the governor until that special election was held, and you would have a special election for governor. I would think that would be the case.
So are we talking about whoever won the lieutenant governor's race at the same time that Tuberville won, or are we talking about?
Yes, the same time that Tuberville.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So whoever that is would be sort of like an interim until there was a special election.
We're listening to this after it's published. It's screaming that I'm incorrect about this. Because the other option is obviously it would go to the challenger in the race.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's what I would think. It'd have to be one or the other.
Governor,
yeah.
And
assuming that Doug Jones is running, which he has told you he's not.
No. He told us.
That's what I'm saying. He told us he's not.
About it.
No, he said that he was. My recollection is that he said he was disinclined to do it. So I took that to be he's not going to do it.
Did you hear no in that? Man, I would never.
Well, I mean, the way he laid it out. I mean, I just walked away thinking, well, he must not be going to do it because he said he was disinclined to do it, and he went through this sort of elaborate, lengthy. So are you saying, okay, so now let's shift away from Randy Kelly and all that stuff? You're saying you think Doug is going to run?
To do something by my wife a lot, but sometimes you can work your way to the incline.
So do you think? So do you think Doug is going to run?
Yes, I do.
Oh, okay.
I think that he's going to. I think he's going to run for something. Yes. I think that.
Well, you said something. I mean, for governor?
I think he's probably going to run for governor. Yes.
Okay.
I think that it sets up a very intriguing contest between him and Tuberville. Again, I think it. I'm sticking with. I don't think a Democrat can win. Okay, I still believe that.
Yeah.
I still believe that a Democrat cannot win in this state in a regular election. Okay, I know what happened with him and Roy Moore. That was a special election. It was a special circumstance. You didn't have the straight party voting on the thing. I don't think that that's possible in a general election. But I do think that it creates such a buzz in such um, a phenomenon, I would say. But the two of them together, I think, because it also brings in a national sort of attention and focus and things, and it brings in national dollars to a Democratic Party in this state that desperately needs that attention. And I think that's part of the plan, is that he would use this to help out a bunch of Democrats, to help out some PACs, to help out some people who need it.
Well, I'll say this. Whether it's Doug or somebody else, whoever it is that ultimately ends up running against Tuberville, assuming that Tuberville is going to kind of breeze through as we expect, I think it's the best chance for Doug or whomever to win. And the reason I say that is because I think Tuberville, as we've already kind of laid out, he is the most vulnerable Republican running for statewide office that we've seen maybe ever. I mean, it's certainly in my lifetime, I'm going to say, or I won't say my lifetime, I'll say my time in this state. I think he's the most vulnerable one, because he's vulnerable not just on the residency issue. I think he's vulnerable because he's just generally been incompetent. I think he's vulnerable because of what he did related to mucking up the military
Holds.
The military holds. I was trying to say promotions, but the military holds. I think he's vulnerable in at least three, and then also you might even argue he's vulnerable in terms of the belief that he's been doing some very suspect stock market trading that tends to suggest that perhaps he was doing something at least that's unethical, if not illegal, but definitely unethical.
I think there are a number of things out there. You're right. It's there's a whole fountain of things, which was really confusing to me why Will Ainsworth decided to run from this thing, because I felt like there were a lot of factors at play here, and those factors were exactly what you talked about. First of all, I mean, he's got a built-in 30 to 35% dislike on it. The people that are just not going to vote for him, and that's Republicans, Democrats on both sides of this thing. There's 30 to 35% of the people out there that just are simply not going to vote for him because they don't take him seriously and they don't like him. And I get that. And he's also a very tough candidate for a lot of Republicans, I think, to hold their nose and vote for. So I think that damages him well. So where you could see a major problem for him is in people who just say, I can't vote for a Democrat, but I'm just not voting. I'm not going to vote for that. I just can't do it. And so I think, just simply people not bubbling in the governor's race on there is going to be a problem for him. But I think you're right. He's very, very, very polarizing. Okay. And so it automatically generates a buzz, and it makes get out the vote efforts that much more effective, and it makes them a little easier. It brings in money from all corners of the globe, from people who have seen him and his act and detest him. And so I think it is an absolute windfall for Democrats that he is going to end up, probably being the Republican nominee. I think it's the best thing that they could have ever hoped for at this point in time, and I hope that they all capitalize on it. I'll say this: this is like the praise Randy Kelly hour here, but I mean I will also say I was very encouraged when I talked to Randy Kelly about the prospect of Doug Jones running. And I got back a response, which was, well, we'll have to see. We got a lot of good candidates, and I think, if Doug Jones wants to run, then we'll look at supporting him. What? Come on, man.
Well, I think that's pretty logical. I mean, that's not a stretch to me, because whoever the Democrat is, the Democratic Party in the state of Alabama is going to have to support.
Well, yeah.
So that's not a big.
That's
not a big stretch.
Well, yeah, but I mean, come on, for that relationship and what it is.
Well,
how many other times have we put up Doug Jones' name and received a fairly positive response from Randy?
Yeah, but I think the groundwork was already laid for that, Josh, because he made he apologized. He made the concession that kept him from being sued. So I think the groundwork has already been laid, and it's clear to me, because Randy Kelly, one thing for sure, you can like Randy Kelly or not, you can disagree with him or agree with him, whatever. But one thing I think, I know I certainly can say without any hesitation is that he's not a stupid man. He's a smart guy. So, of course, if Doug Jones ends up being the Democratic nominee, he's going to put aside whatever it is personally, and he's going to put aside the past and he's going to support him.
I hope so. I hope that is the case. I hope that we can move to some level of just getting together, of just work on this and move and use this to better every aspect, because you could do it, and you could use this to better every aspect of the party and of the state.
Exactly.
You could do
this could represent, no matter, in my mind, no matter who the nominee ultimately is for governor or any other statewide office.
Yeah.
This represents an opportunity for the Democratic Party in Alabama to heal and to turn itself around. So what I hope is that no matter who the nominee is for governor on the Democratic side, because I don't assume it's going to be Doug Jones at all, but if it is Doug, fine. If it's not Doug, fine. Whoever is in these various offices, as far as I'm concerned, let's see beyond past issues. Let's see beyond preconceived concerns, and let's let this be an opportunity for this party to do the maturing and the growing and make some progress that it needs to make.
Last question, and we'll get out of here because I know we've run long.
All right.
But don't you think it needs to be Doug?
Nope. I don't think it needs to be Doug. I think it needs to be whoever is the best suited for it. And I'm not convinced, in my mind, I'm not convinced that that's Doug.
What
I know you are, but I'm not.
Why would you not be? Well,
what
person would be better suited, I guess? And not necessarily I'm not asking you necessarily to name a person. I'm just saying, what does that person look like?
For me, that person looks like somebody who is able to bridge what I think is a real, I'm going to say, tenuous gap in our state. Democrats have historically not, I think, have faced some challenges in this present political era that we've been in for, I don't know, maybe 30 years, 25, 30 years. Democrats have had a real problem, I think, in terms of imaging and messaging in a way that has the broadest type of appeal. We are, people, Alabama's the butt of a lot of jokes, subject to a lot of criticism. But regardless of how you feel about Alabama, Alabama is a very religious state. Alabama is a state that I think is consistently to the right of the rest of a large portion, I should say, of the rest of the country. And so I think the right kind of Democrat is somebody who has the ability to speak to the base, but also to line up with Alabama, some of Alabama's traditional core values, not the least of which is faith and religious practices, specifically Christianity. And I think that's, for my money, that's the kind of candidate that is going to have the best possible shot at winning statewide. Somebody who can say unequivocally, I'm a Christian, but I'm the kind of Christian who has empathy for not just the poor and the least of these, but for women's rights, for LGBTQ people. Somebody who is able to I think, speak to both sides and sort of be a bridge.
Right.
That's what I think.
Well, I mean, I think that you're not wrong, first of all. But I also, I think that Doug gets most of the way there on most of those things. And to me, and I'll say this, I'm skewed a bit because I don't think the Democrats going to be able to win the governor's race. And so I put more emphasis on what effect that race would have on other races down the ballot and in flipping, some seats in the legislature that I think could get us back to closer to, killing off that supermajority and making life a whole lot better for a lot of people around here. And to me, the spectrum of Doug versus Tuberville just brings so much attention and money and willingness of people to get out and work and do the get out the vote stuff. And that sort of energy, I think, is what I'm more focusing on, and not necessarily. I agree with you on the candidate overall to lead us and who it needs to be. And I'm not saying it's not Doug, but I'm just saying I think that it's I just think that we're in a situation now at this particular point where the most effective person to do that is Doug Jones. To help the state in the spot that we're in. But I don't disagree with what you said.
Yeah, and let me be clear. I'm going to support whoever the Democrat is.
Yeah.
I'm going to support that person. So, if it's Doug, Doug will have my support on this podcast and anywhere else. If it's somebody else, they will have my support, because I know one thing for sure. It sure as heck does not need to be Tommy Tuberville. And I can't think of anybody else that I would rather see on the Republican side that I'd rather see in that office than a Democrat.
Yeah. So we definitely agree on that. All right, let's slide out. We're going to come back.
All right.
We'll get Beth Shelburne in to depress us endlessly. With her, fantastic.
I love
reporting.
Beth.
Oh my God,
I love Beth, man.
Oh, I love
man.
Beth.
She's a gift to the state.
She should, yes. I mean, we should seriously think about creating some sort of a statue for her. But oh God, what she does, I don't know how she does it. I really don't.
It's tough.
Well, as we'll hear, the disco helps. So, all right, we're going to slide. It's Alabama Politics This Week, brought to you by Wing Creek Entertainment. We're back in a minute. Welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person, and we are happy now to have back with us again. It's investigative reporter, freelance journalist, all around thorn in the side of the folks at ADOC because they need a lot more thorns. It is Beth Shelburne. Thank you, Beth, for coming on and spending some time so we can talk about the great work you've been doing here of late.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be back a third time. Third time's the charm.
Yeah.
And let me just say, I misspoke. I should not have said. I should not have added of late. You do have some very recent things that you have done, but the great work has extended well beyond these things. The stuff that you've brought to light in the prisons, I think, really have brought a focus on that awfulness that has been going on for a long time now. And so I don't want to diminish that just because you wrote some new stuff. But yeah, the new stuff is kind of what we wanted to talk about. You had a series that ran in the Alabama Reflector, and appreciate them, paying for good work because it was good work. And I believe it was I guess it was it maybe a series of 3, and then there was also an explainer of how you gathered the information as well that ran. And so I guess overview wise, what this series, what was it? What did you want to do? How did it turn out? Was it like you wanted?
So, yeah, this was a heavy, heavy lift. We wanted to try to get a total picture of ADOC's legal spending, which is astronomical and really unprecedented. We sort of knew that already, but we didn't have the total picture. And so what I wanted to focus on for this series that we titled Blood Money, because we kind of came to view all of this cash flowing out of public coffers into mainly attorneys' pocketbooks as blood money, because it's all tied to abuse in our prison system. But we wanted to focus on not the big class action lawsuits that have gotten a lot of coverage over the last couple of years, the Department of Justice lawsuit against the entire system over unconstitutional conditions. We also have the big class action lawsuit over mental health care that's now in its 10th year of litigation. We knew that a huge amount of money has gone to pay for all that litigation. $39 million is what we had tallied up. But we wanted to look at what lawyers call retail lawsuits. So civil lawsuits filed by individuals in the prison system against individuals who work there. So we expected to find a lot of lawsuits tied to wrongful deaths filed by family members of people who have been killed in the prison system, medical neglect. And what was most surprising in this batch of lawsuits that we looked at in this particular time period that had ended in paid settlements between 2020 and 2024, the vast majority of the 124 that resulted in paid lawsuits were filed over excessive force. And that was something that I did not expect to find. I thought there would be some excessive force cases, but I didn't know it would make up the vast majority of this onslaught of lawsuits. So we wanted to look at the lawsuits themselves, what was being alleged, what happened during the litigation, why did they end in paid settlements, but we also wanted to study the financial impact of this. We're paying for it. We're paying for the lawyers to defend abusive officers. We're paying for the settlements, and we wanted to kind of get our arms around what this looks like for taxpayers, because nobody has been paying attention to this money coming out of not our general fund budget, but the General Liability Trust Fund, which is a separate pot of money that the state has created to pay out liability claims and defend state employees who are sued.
All right. So, yeah. Some more good news.
You can understand why it took me 6
Yeah.
months to do this reporting, because it was arcane and it was the most tedious investigative project I've ever worked on.
Well, and I'm sure the folks of the state were very happy to help you collect all of this information and get it right out to you in a easy to read format.
Well, the Department of Finance did respond to my records request. That's how I was able to look at all this financial data, is they sent me the spreadsheets, but it wasn't a one and done thing. They hadn't really even prepared this data internally, so they had to kind of create materials that I was asking for from scratch, and I had to kind of keep going back to them and asking for more, asking for explainers, and they played ball with me. It wasn't always on my timetable, but
Right.
they did respond.
Yeah, I will say, in my experience, the Department of Finance has always been one of the more forthright agencies that I've ever dealt with, and mainly it's because there's a bunch of number people over there, and they're just like, yeah, here are the numbers, take them. But I wanted to. So now we've all seen. Like you kind of recapped to the beginning. We've all seen these problems, the really big ones, the lawsuits and all the other things that have come about. We've also all heard the stories of the guards being arrested for the contraband. We know we've had Chris England on a few times, and he's talked about the fact that during the height of COVID, the prisoners were not even allowed visits with their attorneys. So no one besides the guards were coming and going from the prisons every day. And yet somehow the overdose deaths and drugs in the prison did not lessen at all. So I guess my question, and maybe this is not necessarily fair to ask you, but has there is there any sense among these people that that lead this state that we're doing a pretty poor job of hiring the folks that oversee our prisons? And listen, I'm going to say, I'm going to put in the normal caveat here and say I know a couple of prison guards, okay, and they're good people who care. But I will also say there are good people who are vastly underpaid for what they do with and what they have to deal with and the danger that they incur on a daily basis. And so I can understand how that deters a lot of really good people who could go into our prisons because the pay and the benefits are not there, although they have upped them recently. But is there any sense that there needs to be an overhaul of who we're hiring and or who's just currently there?
No. Except with Chris England and maybe some folks that will talk off the reservation about some of these problems, but won't do anything publicly. I think that you've put your finger on what is a major problem, and it is this corruption within this agency. I mean, reading some of these lawsuits with these harrowing accounts of officer abuse, the incidents felt more like gang attacks than they did excessive force, because you've got in these prisons sometimes a cabal of corrupt officers that will go after certain prisoners and target them for various reasons. Sometimes I think it's just sadism. I mean, the environment is so corrupt, and the power imbalance is there, as we know from like the Stanford prison experiment. It's ripe for abuse. The DOJ also named this as a major problem within the agency, and there's just been no public acknowledgement or acceptance of that by lawmakers. They would much rather talk about correcting the building infrastructure, building the new mega prison, and focusing on, I think, those aspects of this crisis that they're a lot more comfortable with. But that's really the uncomfortable truth, is we have a system that is full of corrupt individuals. And so far, the system itself has been unwilling to police itself. It's not just abuse, it's also just abysmal investigations internally. And we walk readers through several of those in the series. So I really had a hard time grappling with the just human cost of this series, because the abuse is so grotesque that's detailed in these lawsuits. But I think I'm equally bothered by the lack of response from state leaders. It's just been crickets from every office that I've reached out to, from the governor on down. I have reached out to the Attorney General's office for months to engage with them on this, and I have gotten zero response.
Yeah, the Cody Williams ordeal that he went through, where I mean, it was exactly what you described. It just seemed like a gang attack. Obviously that's his description of what happened. Is one officer punched him and threw him on the ground, and then the other officers who were there started kicking and beating him. And it was not a situation where he was threatening them. It was not a situation where he was running from them. They had asked him to go to the barber shop because they were questioning him about contraband that they thought was his. And when he refused to admit it was his, that's when they started the beating, according to his testimony. And obviously there had to be a little bit of truth to it, because they paid out some money to him. And
a lot of money.
Yeah. It's very, you hate to use words like troubling, because it's such an inadequate word to say it's troubling. It sounds like, the normal naive guy on the outside. Oh, it's very troubling. But it's so, I mean, honestly, it's just disgusting, to think that we're operating this system and we're paying for it, and we're paying probably more money than we would if we run a good system.
Absolutely. I mean, we identified 17 million additional dollars that have been funneled into this litigation since 2020 that had not been publicly reported. And so you couple that with the 39 million that's come out of the general fund budget. Our spending over prison litigation, mainly to lawyers, okay? Mainly to private lawyers like the firm Butler Snow in Huntsville and various others that gobble up these no-bid contracts. $57 million the state has spent since 2020, and this is against the backdrop of these conditions in the prisons that are just absolute squalor, that the legislature has long said, well, we don't have money. We don't have any money to fix these problems. Well, we clearly have money to pay attorneys to defend the system. And that's part of the reason that I was interested in this is, these lawsuits that are resulting in paid settlements are an interesting cohort of lawsuits to look at, because these are not frivolous lawsuits. I mean, you file a lawsuit, they don't immediately cut you a check. It has to go through several rungs of our federal court system. And a magistrate or federal judge has looked at the complaint, looked at the evidence that the prisoner or whoever filed with it, affidavits, medical records, whatever they submitted. The judge looks at the state's motion to dismiss, which is always filed. They'll file a motion to dismiss saying this isn't true, we claim immunity, there's not a credible claim here. And the judges are saying, nope, I'm not going to dismiss. This needs to go to trial and be heard by a jury. And so all that has to happen first, and then the state will start talking about settlements. So ADOC was very quick to tell me a paid settlement is not an admission of guilt or wrongdoing. Well, that's true, but it is a liability payment. And it is in some ways a victory for the plaintiff because they're getting something out of the system, some measure of accountability. But the state is doing this in astronomical numbers, 124 lawsuits that I identified since 2020 that have resulted in settlement, while they are publicly denying that there are unconstitutional conditions in the prisons. And so it's like these lawsuits are filed over the same conditions, over the same allegations. So it's almost like we've got a public-facing state saying, oh, no, nothing to see here. We don't have unconstitutional conditions, and we're going to use your money to fight the DOJ while quietly paying out all these lawsuits to make these individual lawsuits go away.
Beth, I'm sitting here thinking how much I like having you on the podcast. But then when you come, I always also end up thinking, man, this is crazy, evil, just disturbing. There are not enough adjectives I can find.
I don't know how she lives with it. I don't know how she. I don't know how you do it.
And what I'm wondering, honestly, is as you were describing this system, I mean, it sounds as though we've got a system. You use the word corruption, but it sounds as though we've got a system that isn't just corrupt in the prisons. It sounds as though we've got a completely corrupt political system, because you're also saying to us, you've reached out to the AG, you've reached out to the governor's office, and nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Mm-mm. Yeah, you're right. It's a really hard truth to kind of sit with, to do this kind of reporting and put all this information out there, which is outrageous on so many fronts, and to be met with silence. It's like, what do we do with that? It is hard. I will say personally, I have developed some coping mechanisms to deal with, the difficult subject matter. I bake. I'm in a disco dance organization that performs in full costume. I mean, I do things to kind of like find joy, but this topic and this crisis is really important. I think it's I'm now in my 13th year of covering ADOC, and the problems have gotten worse, not better. And so I think it's just really important, and it's on all of us to stay on top of it. And I'm happy to be the one to dig in and try to get to the truth of all this, because I'm an investigative reporter and kind of like a bulldog. Once I get a bone, I'm not going to drop it.
So
So
let me
but
ask
yeah.
you this, Beth.
Mhm.
How does Alabama stack up to other states? Do you have any sense of that?
That's a great question. And we really tried to report on some kind of state by state comparison when it comes to lawsuits, and there isn't data to access. No other state is like publicly reporting, oh, this many prisoners have sued our system and this many lawsuits ended in settlement. It's like really hard to track all that down, and no one really has a full picture. There are metrics that we can look at, and it's things like the number of deaths in our prison system, the number of suicides, the number of overdoses, the overcrowding. And by all of those metrics, we are, if not the worst prison system in the nation, we are one of the worst consistently. And I think that, that is the part that is the crisis that really needs to be dealt with first. All of this reporting that I've done is really the effect on taxpayers and sort of what's happening behind the scenes that I think from a transparency standpoint is in the public interest to be out there. Um, but as far as lawsuits, I mean, I talked to some prison experts. They also said, there's not really a database where we can like do a state by state comparison, but they thought the number of lawsuits that I found that had resulted in settlement, and just the number of lawsuits period, was extreme. And one former prison chairman from the state of Washington said, that's inconceivable to me, to have that many lawsuits against a prison system and nothing is happening internally to correct
Huh.
these conditions. He called it inconceivable.
Right. I wonder if one of the reasons that our politicians, our elected officials, seem to be nonchalant about all of this is that they think that the liability issue is really, relatively speaking, negligible, meaning the payout is negligible, the blowback, from even the Justice Department, relatively speaking, may be perceived as negligible. Do you think that's part of what explains, their lack of concern and their lack of responsiveness?
Yes, it's not their money. It's our money, and the General Liability Trust Fund is there for these kinds of situations. The problem is it's basically turned into a pot of money for the ADOC to use exclusively to handle its litigation, particularly concerning abusive officers. I feel like the prison horror show has become so normalized in our state that this kind of reporting that reveals this almost cottage industry that's like popped up around prison litigation, um, is these lawmakers kind of see it as like the cost of doing business. This is just part of prison, and that's a choice. It doesn't have to be this way. There are other states that have remade their prison systems. I visited the maximum security prison in Maine a few years ago. They don't have the same population that we have, so they only have one major maximum security prison for men. It's got about 5,000 people in it, so it's a big facility. But there was a group of leaders that went into that prison in the last 5-10 years that had visited Scandinavian prisons. and decided, we're going to do this differently. This isn't going to be a police state. We are going to turn this into a truly rehabilitative space. And everybody's going to have jobs and go to classes and go to therapy. And I walked through that prison. I felt completely safe. There were therapy dogs. There were, prisoners walking all over the place. And everybody was, honestly in a good mood. They were all speaking to each other like human beings. And this was just policy changes that they made. They didn't have to build a $1.5 billion mega prison to do this. They literally just decided, we're going to do this differently. They got everybody on board. They instituted some training, and they have zero violence in their prison. Zero. I asked them, how many people do you have in solitary confinement? None. The officers don't carry spray or batons. They don't beat people. They de-escalate things by talking it through. And it sounds sort of like a pie in the sky idea, but it can be done. I mean, it is being done. And so I have kind of come to view Alabama's prisons as a result of intentional policy choices that we have made over the years, our leaders have made over the years, and they're perfectly comfortable with it.
But are we talking about murderers and rapists and hardcore criminals in Maine?
Yeah, the same people getting convicted of the same kind of crimes that are convicted here in Alabama, all over the Deep South. I mean, you've got people serving time in prisons all over the country for the same things. People grab a gun and they shoot someone and they get convicted of murder. People deal drugs. People burglarize places. I mean, people do harm other people and they go to prison for it. This isn't a group of quote unquote nonviolent offenders in Maine. These are people that are convicted of rape and murder and burglary and robbery and all the things that people are convicted of here. They're just being treated in a completely different way.
Yeah, I've argued a lot that what we have is a result of intentional cruelty. That we've governed with this expectation of cruelty that and really we've instilled it in a lot of the population, that we want some form of cruelty to be present in our prisons because we feel like that's a deterrent. At least I say stupidly. I say it's stupid because honestly, it's just retribution. It does nothing to achieve the goals that we're seeking to achieve. Because if you're going to complain on one hand that we're going to be that we're going to be paying to feed and house these folks for the next however many years, you can't make that complaint and then do the things that assures you that you're going to be paying for those people for the next however many years, and that's what we're doing. It seems is that we're continuing to stick people into dark holes and not care what's taking place there. And I don't see anybody, and maybe you've seen it somewhere, and so I'll ask, do you see any indication from anybody other than Chris England and a handful of the normal folks that we know that they've taken a look at the expenses, the embarrassment of the lawsuits, the embarrassment of having the Trump DOJ file a lawsuit against you because of this? The billions of dollars now that we're spending just to build a prison that's not going to alleviate the overcrowding issues. All of this collection of just pure awfulness. Not to mention the recidivism rate that's not exactly something to be proud of either. Has anyone looked at this and said, none of this is working?
I think that there's a couple of lawmakers that are starting to see the light. Clyde Chambliss is one of them. But whether they're thinking about it in all the terms that you just mentioned, I don't know. I think that it sounds kind of crass, but I think you guys will understand what I'm getting at. There's been a lot of young white men that have been victimized in this system, and their parents who are people that look and sound like members of the legislature have become really vocal. And I think that that, sadly, is what it has taken to move the needle and get these folks' attention. But, I agree with you that there seems to be acceptance that cruelty is part of the game here and that it's perfectly acceptable. There's this notion that, prison shouldn't be easy. It should be hard. And we don't want to give people anything that makes it easy. Well, having your liberty taken away and put in a uniform with a number on it and stuck in a dirty cell for God knows how long is not easy, and that is the punishment and nothing more. So all these add-ons of like, we're going to throw drug trafficking in there and you're going to have dope all over the place. It's going to tempt you and you might get hooked on some stuff, and then you're going to get extorted by staff and other prisoners, and you might get trafficked and raped and thrown out on the sidewalk, because we've got homeless folks in our prison system. We have people that don't have a bed to sleep on. And the reason they don't is because gangs inside the prisons who run the contraband trade have taken over cell blocks. And, the guards are not doing anything about it. So we have folks sleeping on sidewalks, sleeping in day rooms, because they literally don't have a bed. And it's not overcrowding, it's mismanagement. And so there are, problems that are, just so mind-blowing in the system. Just the fact that some lawmakers are starting to pay attention to the horrific odysseys some of these family members have gone on when their loved ones were killed in some kind of awful, protracted way. The fact that they're finally paying attention, I think, is good, but I don't think that they are embracing, acknowledging, or looking into the sort of quagmire aspect of this, that there are so many problems. Like, where do you start? And then on the other hand, you have some who are in complete denial. I reached out to one Republican lawmaker to report my findings and explain to him, it's 124 lawsuits and it's cost X amount of dollars, $17 million, and the vast majority of them were over excessive force. And he said, well, that's why I support building these new prisons, is it's going to keep everybody safer. And so I pushed him and said, well, these aren't lawsuits about the prison structures. They're about guards abusing people. And when I say abusing, I don't mean slapping them in the face. I mean sending them to the hospital with multiple catastrophic injuries, broken bones, traumatic brain injuries, knocking their teeth out, giving them a concussion. I mean, it's just, these are horrific assaults. So I pushed him on it. And then he said, well, I mean, as long as you have gang members in there, there's going to be violent encounters. And it was just like, every time I tried to sort of put the truth in front of him, he would go to some other defense mechanism to explain it away in a way that made him comfortable. So to call it an uphill battle to sort of win even the information on this is like putting it mildly. I think we have an empathy problem in this state. If it's not happening to your family or to somebody who then it's not happening. And that's certainly the case with criminal justice issues. There are people that care. There are people that work in prison ministry that feel, for these problems. But by and large, the population doesn't give a crap. If it's not happening to them, it's not happening.
Yeah, it's It's maybe the opioid crisis will save us from this one as well, because that seems to be where a lot of the folks that you mentioned, a lot of the white people ended up in prison. They've ended up there over the opioid crisis, and now they're experiencing the horrors that have been afflicted upon a number of Black and Hispanic and just folks that for generations. And it's just, it's a shame that it takes more cruelty to somebody else to fix the problem. But hey, look, thank you for coming on.
Yes,
I know
yes.
you're going to get out of here and go directly to an Alabama legislature prison oversight committee, which has got to be an oxymoron in there somewhere. And so, but we appreciate you coming and telling people what's going on and the work that you do. Like I said, during this, I have no idea how, I mean, it is just the most depressing thing. I mean, it's such fantastic work that you've done, but my God, it's so depressing. I mean, it's just listening to the people and the lack of empathy and cruelty. And
She's got disco, Josh. She's got disco, man. That's
right.
Right.
That's right.
Long live disco. No, I will tell you the other thing that I sort of rest in is the amazing strength that a lot of these people have that are in the system, to file a lawsuit without a lawyer, write it out longhand. The majority of these original complaints were handwritten, and that the complaints are uploaded into Pacer, the federal court system, and you can see them, and they're, scratched out, and some of the pages will have stains on them. I mean, these folks, it's a real testament to, people remaining strong in the face of horrific oppression and abuse. And then the families too, that continue to support their loved ones and fight for them. I hate that this is the situation that they're in, but I am uplifted by the way that people persevere in this, and many of these prisoners that I talk to, can still have a sense of humor, can still find ways to make their lives meaningful in prison by doing art, by creative writing, by developing relationships. I mean, it's really kind of incredible. But that doesn't take away from the fact that these folks are being abused. And, I can't stand by and let that happen without speaking out.
Well, we certainly appreciate what you do. I know they do as well, and the state is better for the work that you've done and the light that you've shown on this stuff. And maybe one day somebody will stand up and use what you've done here and make some of this stuff right. But hey, thanks for coming on, spending some time, and keep it up, I guess stay alive.
Thanks,
staying
y'all.
alive.
Thank y'all so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Bless
All
you,
right, thank
Bev. Bless you.
All right, that is Beth Shelburne. Y'all read her stuff, Alabama Reflector. Go and read the series. Let them know how much you enjoy it, so that maybe more folks will pass it around. Maybe more folks will hire her, and we'll pay a lot more attention to this stuff. All right, we're gonna slide out. We'll come back, wrap this thing up in just a minute. It's Alabama Politics This Week. Back in a minute. Alrighty, welcome back. Alabama Politics This Week. Josh Moon, David Person. Our thanks to Beth Shelburne for coming on and doing exactly what I promised she was going to do, just depress everybody with horrific stories.
In honor of Beth, when we sign off, I'm going to put on my podcast Chic's Good Times. I need to hear some nice old fashioned 1970s disco, like Beth would do. That's what I'm with.
That's right. Well, our thanks to her. Thanks to the folks at Wind Creek Entertainment for sponsoring. Thanks to the folks at Southern Poverty Law Center for sponsoring.
Yes.
Thanks to all of you for listening and downloading and subscribing and leaving the reviews and all that you do and spreading this thing around. I've the TikTok little videos are really starting to catch on. I've noticed that my Vin Diesel impersonation is really starting to strike some people. I really appreciate that. It was called Moon Diesel a few times, and so
Moon Diesel. Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, and so listen, y'all spread them around, spread it around. Let folks know. We appreciate everybody doing all you can. And listen, it's free. We hadn't charged a dime for any of this. So, y'all enjoy the commentary and the information and don't ever say that there's nobody out there trying to give you the other side of things. All right. 'Cause there is.
Well, somebody sent me some kind of a rank. I don't know who issued this list, but of the top 10 Alabama political podcasts, and they had us at the number 1 slot. So I wasn't clear on whether or not they were saying we were the number 1 or whether they were or it was just some sort of a listing. It didn't seem to be alphabetical.
No, David, we're number 1. God damn it. We're number 1.
I look, man, from your lips to God's ears. That's how I look at it. But I'm just saying, it wasn't clear to me because I don't want to misconstrue it or have anybody think I'm trying to say something. That's
it's not a question. We're number 1 by a wide margin. Well, I'm not even saying it. We're not. We are. I'm not even like being facetious about this. We are.
Well, you're being serious now.
Yeah,
okay, so so you've seen the rankings.
I've seen all the rankings. Yeah, I've seen the subscriptions.
Okay,
I've seen the whole thing. We're way above everybody else.
Well, good. I love that. I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear
that. I would say outside of maybe 2 radio shows in the Birmingham area, that we also have more listeners than the radio shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would say.
See, I haven't looked at the numbers. I haven't. I didn't know that.
Most of those radio shows.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
Most of those radio shows you could fit in a phone booth. The listeners. Really, nobody's listening. How many people do you know at this point who are listening to AM or FM radio?
Well, that's true. The listening habits have dramatically changed. Now, I keep hearing about 2 shows. One is, I think, Jeff Poor, I think his name is. And the other one is Chris Coleman. Those are the two Birmingham shows that I hear the most about.
Well, now Poor is on down in Mobile. And I know.
He's in Mobile.
Okay. He's the 1819 editor.
That's who that guy is.
Yeah. Okay. And look, I talk to Poor occasionally, and I would say that we're friendly. We're on friendly terms, and so I don't dislike him, but it's just he does his thing, we do our thing.
Right.
The way I view it, and I think the way Jeff Poor views it is, we are mutually beneficial to each other. They give they give a take that I find to be absolutely utterly insane. And so that sets us up to give the reality of things. You know what I mean? And I think that helps out. But regardless, yes, we do very well. And so we're always.
But you've never heard of Chris Coleman in Birmingham?
I've not heard of Chris Coleman. No, I've not.
Yeah, I've heard about him quite a bit. Apparently, he's got a lot of people that listen to him. I don't know.
Yeah. So right wing, left wing?
No, I think he's left wing. African American guy, seems to have from what I hear, he's got like a serious following and thousands of folks that listen. From what I hear.
Well, I'll try to go check it out. I do not. I hope if Chris Coleman listens to this, I hope he did not take me saying that in any sort of disparaging way. I'm not disparaging anybody. I'm in my bubble over here. We all get
me
a
too.
Bit of a bubble, and mine. I'll tell you this: if he created a 7U girls softball podcast, I might be more inclined to listen at this point in my life, and so maybe hopefully that explains the bubble, and I hope he does. If he hears me say that he does not take it the wrong way. So, but all right, let's right wing nut. and get ourselves out of here. Our right wing nut is Donald John Trump, and I know that that's an easy. That's like shooting fish in a barrel at this point. But I mean, the man put
No,
out
this is necessary though. Go ahead. I'm
the
sorry.
man put
This
out
is necessary.
a statement on Memorial Day that, first of all, failed to mention the fallen troops in his Happy Memorial Day message, but did mention the scum that used to run the country and judges who were not allowing him to do illegal things. Imagine that. It was a rambling, incoherent mess of a statement in all caps that looked like it was honestly written by your drunk uncle on the heels of Thanksgiving. And it just is, it's embarrassing, man. I mean, somebody said the other day, we're pretty sure that America is the only place that has a leader that would use the word scum and talk about judges in all caps and in such a screed like this. We're the only country that currently has that, and it's an embarrassment. It really is an embarrassment.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that we could criticize about that post, just the utter disrespect of the whole spirit and point of Memorial Day, the disrespect to those who have lost, people that have worn the uniform and died wearing the uniform. There's just so much we could say about it. But one thing that just kind of struck me, Josh, is how relentlessly negative it was and how relentlessly negative Trump is. And I just wonder sometimes, how can a person live with all that bile inside of them that even when given an opportunity to be positive, to say something that's hopeful, inspiring, he doesn't have the internal wherewithal to do it.
No.
It's just mind-blowing to me.
It's just it's his entire existence is a personal grievance,
Yes.
And it's just, and it's relentless and never ending, and it's embarrassing, and it's tiring, and it's unconstitutional most of the time. And it's all, what has the country done for him, and what can he do for himself, and how are these people wronging him by not letting him do everything that he wants to do, and it's all built around this facade of helping people, and he's never helping anybody. It's like, I pointed out in the column that I wrote about this. It's the perfect example is the child tax credit. To me, I mean, it looks like on paper, oh, look, here's this great win for parents where we're going to take the $2,000 and make it $2,500. Well, except for the fact that now we're also reducing the refundable portion. So if unless you have enough of this in taxes that you owe, you can only get a certain portion back because now that we've cut that out and reduced that way down. And then in addition to that, if both of your parents, we've also raised the income limits on the thing, and so if you make below a certain level, now you no longer qualify for that. And in addition to that, if both of your parents don't have a Social Security number, not a work ID number, but a Social Security number, then you're no longer eligible, even though you and one parent may be United States citizens. But if both parents don't, well, then you're now ineligible. And so we've just eliminated, I want to say, between 4 and 5 million children from taking this thing altogether. And these are the most needy children. The most needy children out there. And it's the same with all of this stuff. We have cut Medicaid. He wants to cut Medicaid. He wants to cut Social Security. He wants to cut SNAP benefits. He wants to cut all of these different things that go to aid the least of us because he has a goal of rewarding the most, the people with the absolute most. And this is where we are, and this is what we're putting up with. And I mean, I understand that it's harder to convince somebody they've been fooled than it is to fool them. But I mean, God, I just, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Man, I don't know. I'm at a loss, and And I think that one day people are going to look back on this era and just think, what in the world was going on with this country? How could it have been so cruel, so unrelentingly, brazenly cruel to children? I mean, you know, it's one thing if you want to, and even this is debatable in my mind, but I can at least say it's one thing if you want to target adults. Adults can generally fend for themselves, but, you know, though a lot of the cruelty is, believe me, I'm not even remotely justifying the cruelty towards adults either, but I'm saying I think it hits a little differently, more viscerally, when we're talking about children who are innocent. They don't have any politics. They don't have any agenda other than to be a kid. I mean, what are we doing here? Disturbing, profoundly disturbing.
It really, really is. It has really opened up a lot of eyes, I think, to the level of racism and the levels of bigotry and the levels of simple indifference to human suffering that a lot of people who you used to respect, who I used to respect, hold and are okay with because it's not happening to them and that they are benefiting from it. And it has been endlessly disappointing to see the number of people who are going along with this stuff and saying it's okay. And it just is.
And as many of us in the Christian community have been saying, it's especially disturbing that a lot of people, these same people that you're talking about, Josh, are also going to church on the weekends.
Yep.
And talking about how churches. Leading churches, going to church on the weekends, and talking about how much they love Jesus or how they're trying to preach the gospel and they believe and they're followers of Jesus Christ. And then you look at what they're doing and you're thinking, how in the heck can you say you're a follower of Jesus and you subscribe to this when you are giving tacit approval to this kind of behavior? Disgusting.
It's so utterly disappointing on so many levels to watch people excuse away this behavior and there be absolutely no redeeming quality that they are exchanging for it. And there's just more awfulness. You're just exchanging it for more awfulness. And it's disgusting. So, all right, let's get out of here. Until next week, y'all be safe out there.
All right. Peace.